So when we interact with another species, it can be competition. Hey, is competition always with another species?
No.
So that can be within your own species.
Yeah, like the nutches.
Like the nutches, right? Oh, Dr. Seuss, thank goodness.
Are nutches a real thing?
Nope. Completely made up. Wouldn't that be fabulous to be able to just make up that much stuff? Pretty impressive. So competition within and between species. What else?
It could be like mutual, like nothing really happens, like no one benefits or no one.
So you can interact in a way that nobody benefits at all, you just exist in the same space?
Yeah.
Okay. Well, do you think if there are two organisms that don't interact at all, they don't talk at all, they don't share space, or they do share space, let's say, here we go. What do moles eat? Any kind of bug in particular? They eat the white bugs? Wormish things? Grubs. So moles eat grubs. Can you think of anything else that eats a grub? Okay, birds. Any particular kind of bird? Do you think likes grubs more than others? You ever wonder why one lawn will have like a whole flock of birds on it and the next lawn is empty? You ever notice that? You're like, I wonder why they all landed there rather than on this lawn over here. More grubs on the lawn they've landed on. Starlings. They're like little black birds with like gold flecks on them if you get really close to them. Have you seen those? They love grubs. So they'll land in packs on one lawn, and the difference between that lawn and the lawn next to it, I have a sneaking suspicion, is that the one next to it, somebody applied some chemical fertilizer to kill the grubs. So there aren't any in that lawn. So they land where they can find them. Are starlings and moles in direct competition with each other? Because they eat the same food. You said no. Go ahead.
Because like they're not competing, like they don't know who to vote for.
They're aware that they're both eating, but there's a fixed number of grubs, right? Yeah, you're absolutely correct. There's something about starlings and moles you need to know. Something about their choice of lifestyle. How many of you have seen a mole? How many of you are like, I might not have seen a mole, but I've certainly stepped on their little mole tunnels? So you haven't seen them, but you've seen evidence of them. Have you seen a starling? You've seen one. Nobody's told me that the name of it is. I have a feeling. They're not the prettiest thing in the whole world. They're not in direct competition because of two things. One, moles live where?
Underground.
Underground, and starlings live in the air and above ground, right, in trees. Moles are nocturnal. Starlings, you've seen them because they're the opposite of nocturnal. You guys are like dayturnal. European starlings. Diurnal. They're diurnal. So they're not in direct competition. So is it possible that they both exist and there's like no real overlap? Or do you think that competition for the same food is enough overlap to mean they're competitors?
No, they're not.
You don't think they're competitors? We'll think on that one for a little while. We'll come back to it. What about, are there relationships where two species interact together and they both get along fabulously, life is good? It's a win-win for both species. Does that exist? Dogs and humans, you think it's a win-win? Okay.
Those birds that like go on rhinos.
All right. If I say picture a rhinoceros, unfortunately at this point you already know what to picture. But had I said picture a rhinoceros, most of you probably would have pictured a rhinoceros with a bird on its back. Because we're accustomed to seeing them that way. Now I don't know if you know this or not, but a rhinoceros has a joint much like a Barbie doll or a Ken doll. Barbie and Ken have what we might refer to as a limited range of motion, right? Barbie and Ken, no matter how hard they try, cannot do this. You agree? Nor can a rhinoceros. So imagine being the size of a rhinoceros and having an itch right between your shoulder blades. You're certainly not going to ask your fellow rhinoceros companion to scratch it because, well, quite frankly, you look at your fellow rhinoceros companion and notice it's got a horn. There's very little about that that says, I trust that to scratch my back.
And you just roll me back.
Do you think they're really like,
They're
they're not the most agile. They're not, graceful. But you have seen them with a bird on their back. The bird scratches the rhinoceros's back. And you're like, well, what's the bird get out of it? Like, here's a bird, like, oh, I'm gonna land here. It's like a game to see how long it takes to make the rhinoceros angry. Like, perch there. Wait, has it noticed me yet? It hasn't noticed me yet? Has it noticed me yet? You think that's what the bird's motivated by?
No.
What makes the rhinoceros itch? Mud in the sun? What makes a dog itch? Fleas, right? Bugs. Rhinoceroses also have bugs. They rely on the birds to eat the bugs off. The bird gets a meal. It's like a buffet. Think about it. The size of a bird, a rhinoceros, that is a buffet. They just pull on up the buffet, remove the sneeze guard, and start eating. Win for the bird, win for the rhinoceros. That's a possible relationship. Positive for both parties, right? So we have competition. Competition could actually kind of be negative for both parties, right? It'd be better off if your competitor were gone. So I'd say that's negative. We can have positives, where it's a win-win. That relationship has a name. When it's a win-win, we call it a mutualism. Do you think there are relationships where it's a win neutral? So it's good for one and neutral for the other. In your groups, take a moment to think about a pair of species interactions that is a win for one and neutral for another. And you're facing each other, so you're already groups. You could be a mega group. Ariel's like, no, no big deal.
Well, it's mega, we're not mega.
So you'll let it go.
Oh, the shark, yeah. No, don't.
Oh, yeah. What? The birds can eat. I didn't even know
You didn't?
No.
Did you find a picture of a rhinoceros with a bird on its back?
Yeah.
That's not a way.
You're risking death. That's a win negative.
Oh, win negative, those exist?
Win loss.
Well,
No.
yeah,
It could be.
I got one.
Stuff happens.
No, it could be.
You guys have one?
He could be getting food or he could be killed.
Alright, what's yours?
Well, those little fish that hang out like on the bellies of the sharks.
Yeah.
Cleaner fish.
Yeah.
Do the sharks get anything out of it? sure?
They're called cleaner.
They're called cleaner fish. What are those fish doing?
Cleaning.
They're cleaning. That's a win-win.
That bird and the alligator.
Bird and an alligator. What bird?
I forgot what kind of bird it was, but I know that a bird cleans like the alligator cheese really cold.
So does the alligator get something out of it?
Well, he gets his teeth cleaned.
So that bird's a hygienist.
Yeah.
Do alligators use their teeth?
Yeah.
Do you suppose it's important that they get their teeth cleaned?
Yeah.
Okay.
That's a positive.
That's a positive for the alligator.
It's a win and a neutral.
What is
Look
it?
at the bird.
The bird gets
Oh,
food.
it's food, so it's win-win.
It's a win-win.
So good.
We've just found two win-wins, two mutualisms. It's really hard to think of a win-neutral because there are very few win-neutrals that actually exist. In fact, there are scientists out there who suggest there are no win-neutrals. That if the relationship is pulled far enough, that it actually ends up being a win-negative. But I'll give you an example of one. A whale.
That's what I just said.
A whale and a barnacle.
Oh, those.
Barnacles don't really need it.
Barnacles,
They just eat.
they can't move on their own, can they?
No, they have the wheels.
So if they, instead of attaching themselves to a rock, if a whale or if a barnacle attaches itself to a whale, hey, free ride, right? No effort is expended and you get to be mobile. That means you move to wherever your food is and not just waiting for your food to float by, which is what barnacles usually do. It's a win for the barnacle. There are scientists who posited the theory that, quite frankly, it's neutral for the whale. The whale doesn't care. It doesn't help the whale, it doesn't clean the whale, but it doesn't make the whale sick. So, neutral for the whale. Unfortunately, there are other scientists out there who are like, yeah, that's true if you're not a physicist, but it's actually bad for the whale because it increases what we call drag. What is drag? Please take the Kleenex bottle with you.
We have to get up everything.
It increases drag. You ever notice that super fast sporty cars tend to be low to the ground and have a very smooth profile? And so air can just like go right over it, right? Same with the fastest of the fast airplanes. And I'm not talking like a Boeing, because we all know that a Boeing is like not necessarily all that aerodynamic, even though it can fly. But if you think of like a stealth bomber, they're like flat, right?
I have one of
You have a stealth bomber in your garage. Nobody notices it because it's stealth. See where you're going with that.
That's really expensive.
Oh, I
Better.
It was $5.
So you'll notice then that those things are intended to have air go over them. Fish who are really fast, same story. They tend to be very smooth, so water goes right by them,
swordfish.
like a swordfish. Now, whales have water that goes over them in the same smooth fashion, but the thing is, if you add a barnacle to it, then the water has to go over the whale and then over the barnacle, increasing what we call drag. It slows down the whale and makes the whale expend extra energy to swim. But it's whale size. The extra calorie it takes the whale, not really a big deal. So we call that relationship a commensalism. It's a win for the barnacle and is essentially neutral for the whale. A win for the barnacle and essentially neutral for the whale.
What about, wait, so consensualism is
We
the
went
win
with
for
the thingy.
Alright, so clownfish and the right? Alright,
What?
let's think about the clownfish and the anemone.
What?
You know what it's really called?
Clownfish and
But I
the
don't know who
Hey, you seen Finding Nemo?
Isn't that what they
Yeah,
do?
but I don't.
Where's Nemo live?
Anemone.
It lives in Nemo lives in an anemone.
And
I
then
had
I
this
can't say
problem, hang on, I had this problem with animals and aminals as a kid. Is it is it anemone or amen?
Alpha November Echo.
I had to memorize that.
Alpha November Echo.
So anemone.
Anemone.
Amen.
Yeah, see, now we're not making fun of you anymore, are we? Really good, you know? Anemone.
Oh,
Here's the question. If Nemo lives in the anemone, what kind of relationship is it? If you want,
house,
you can, there's surge protectors in that cabinet, like power strips.
the home,
He gets a home and, do you know anything about anemones?
They
They
clean
like, yeah, they go through and take a
Oh, they
bath.
go
Like
through
Nemo
it.
went through.
Anemones are toxic.
and they keep them
What?
safe.
Anemones are
But
toxic.
they
They
clean
secrete a
themselves?
toxin
And only.
that clownfish are immune to.
Wow.
So the clownfish can go through the anemone and pick up some of the anemone toxin, which makes a clownfish not good eats. Think about it. It covers itself, it rolls in a poison essentially, and then it can swim out in such flashy bright colors. I mean, look at this guy. This screams, eat me if you're another fish. Why? Because it's bright orange and white stripes.
That fish looks sad.
Yeah.
That's bad.
I sat next to that aquarium and waited for it to smile.
You took that?
I waited for him to smile. I took all these.
Wow.
How'd you take?
And he didn't.
Yeah, how did you
How'd you
take
take the
that?
young shrimp one?
I went to the Honolulu Aquarium and I hung out at the
You've been
aquarium.
to Hawaii?
Have you ever
Yes.
been to the Chicago?
Yes.
That is really cool.
I want to go to Hawaii.
Oh, have you seen one of those big turtles?
I went to.
Oh, the big.
Honu?
No,
It is
the
big.
Big ones, like the giant turtles.
This is the baby version.
No, like the tortoise. Is that one? Big tortoise.
Oh, yeah, I took that picture too.
How big? How
What
big?
camera do you use?
One of those big, like the big digital Canon SLRs.
Yeah.
One of those. So he screams, "Eat me!" right? And if you are going to be so flashy as to go out in public and swim around wearing a giant arrow that says, "I'm right here," you better have some kind of source of protection from predators, right? And as it turns out, that particular fish, because it swam in the anemone, that's what he's sitting in right there, is the anemone. Because he swam in it, he picked up toxins on his gills and on his fins. Other fish will take one bite and spit him out. Because he
Yeah,
gained
when
that
he-
from the
So
anemone.
if you did like donut
Like, what if he, like, bit his head off?
They'd have to ingest all
Is that how we got out of the
very
whale?
bitter.
No, no,
So-
no.
Wait, is that how Nemo got out of the whale?
No, it was
Most of any fish that's going to eat one of those clownfishes are bigger than the clownfish, so he would actually swallow him whole and then
Like
just spit him back out whole.
Oh, this is Bloomfield.
I know.
Wait, can you say that one more time?
And then, can you explain it one more time?
No, say that one.
Oh, anemone? Anemone. So, and the thing is, fish are not as stupid as they think they are. Once a fish has taken one of those clownfishes in its mouth and realized, this is not very tasty, and spits it back out, the next time it encounters a clownfish, it's going to remember that it was unpleasant, and it will not eat it again. That's a huge win for the clownfish, right?
Clownfish get eaten.
There are some fish
Like
that
the
are
one
immune to
fish
toxin.
You know
And
what
if they're
fish
small.
scares me the most?
But what does the anemone gain out of this? Are you sure?
Hang on.
Wait, let me just think about it.
Oh, the
got
other
nothing.
things, like, get the poison off of the clownfish, and
Do you
then, yeah,
think
and then they realize.
do you think other fish are gonna get too close to an anemone when they see a clownfish?
Oh, it gives the anemone protection.
Oh, yeah, but isn't it a benefit to clownfish?
Well, the clownfish also operates essentially as the anemone's heavy. Like it's like, hey, I live here. I'm gonna protect my territory. You can't get near this anemone. So that's a win for the anemone. It's another mutualism.
Wait, what would other fish do?
Some fish will try and damage, eat, tear up any anemone. There are some things who are immune to the anemone toxin, and they're completely unfazed by it. So what you saw in Nemo is like sort of kind of partially true, but it's a pretty big stretch. Keep that in mind. Big stretch.
When scientists see like Disney movies, do they get upset?
Yes.
I love Disney.
Like I have it railed against every Disney movie.
Like Up?
We believe.
They're like
Up.
Up. With the giant,
I
like,
cried so much in that movie.
No, okay, is it possible for a villain to actually build
Okay.
a house?
Toy Story 3 was the saddest story.
Oh my gosh, that one was just so sad.
There's a
ending.
there's a
I
third
know.
kind of relationship.
Don't even bring that up.
Third kind of relationship that we haven't talked about yet.
Guys, focus.
It's a positive negative relationship.
I got this one, I think.
You got this one?
Snake and a mouse.
So your positive negative is predation. A snake and a mouse, that's predation, right? That's a win for the snake and it's a big lose for the mouse. But there's another kind of win-lose that does not involve necessary death.
A parasite exposed.
Mm-hmm. And we can think of all. Here's what a pairwise interaction table looks like. Yep.
I was wondering, for like parasites, the thing that like is inside your stomach,
Mm-hmm.
what like class would that be?
What is
Uh,
that?
What are species?
Just any species in any given relationship.
Wait, but what if species 1 you choose it to be the parasite?
Well, then that's fine. Then species
Oh, that
one will
one's
be
gonna
the.
different. Oh. Okay, sure, come on.
So here we have our 5%.
So the message is.
Do you want me to put them, like just the corn syrup?
Yeah, on the table.
Wait,
So 1 is a plus and 1 is a negative. For mutualism, there's always these guys on mutual.
That was your corn syrup.
For parasitism, there's 1 negative and
20%, 20%, 20%, 20%. And then I think. Yeah.
what was the third one?
Parasites.
There's 3,
Well, she put predation on there as well. So yeah, I didn't even have to look at you.
I don't think so.
this is actually a pretty good one. Oh yeah, how do you get those?
How do you get what?
The parasite will go in your stomach.
Any parasite that you get in your stomach is because you have ingested it. So you ate it. You didn't eat the parasite itself. Typically what you've done is eaten the egg of the parasite. Once you eat the egg, well then, there you go. Now, I will also say, there are other fascinating parasites that you get not in your stomach. There's some pretty amazing ones that you can get in like your blood. Some you can just get in your skin. That one's gross. Let's skip that one.
Wait,
No,
what?
don't
Good.
skip
We'll do that one. Sometimes you get a parasite because you've been bitten by a bug that had the parasite.
I know what this is.
So that bug is a disease vector. So it spreads disease or spreads parasites. Now, if it spreads bacteria, then it's a disease vector that spreads disease. Or if it spreads a virus, that's like malaria. Malaria is spread by the bite of a mosquito. We don't have to worry about it here because malaria doesn't live here.
What if it didn't?
If it did, we would have to be wrong.
Is there like?
What if it gets here?
So like, have we been?
There are a lot of people who returned from war, Vietnam era, with malaria because malaria is a problem in Vietnam. So there are still people here living with it, but our mosquitoes they aren't capable of distributing it, if you will. But there's a fly, it's a kind of fly that can bite a human.
Oh, I know that. I think I know what you're gonna say. 'Cause
Alright.
I saw it on this weird show.
What's it do?
Wait, this might not be right, but it like bites humans and then does it go into their skin?
And so it deposits the
Is
eggs
it
of a
called
parasite.
botfly? Okay, yeah.
Oh,
Deposit the eggs of a parasite. There are some that, like sand flies will bite the feet of an individual, and they deposit the eggs of a parasite. Those eggs then develop into a worm. Mariel's like, have you done something up? Because I don't want to know about parasites.
Well, I just remember, like, you know, my freshman year, and just, I hated that. It's so gross. But do you want me to put the paper towel or not? And then this is the distilled water, so just leave it here then.
Yeah, distilled water we can come get if you want to put it up here. There are 3 rolls of paper towel that we can put out on 3 different stations. So if you want to just pick 3 of the tables, they can just have paper towel. But there are some super gross ones that when they lay that worm, when the worm develops, it then begins to poke out of the hole that's been like stuck in the person.
And then you have to.
Then you have to carefully pull it out. That's how you get it out.
Oh my,
And if it
No,
breaks,
you
it
should've
causes
like
an
a ticker
infection.
leech, yeah.
Yes.
Yeah, I have.
If it breaks, it causes an infection, and the infection is fatal. So what they do in some third world countries as treatment is take, like, you guys ever seen chopsticks before you break them apart? Like you go get sushi, and they give you some chopsticks, and they're stuck together. They take something that looks kind of like chopsticks. They sandwich the end of the worm between the chopsticks, and they give it a quarter turn, and they leave it.
That's not what I.
And then the next day, they give it another turn, and then they leave it. So they slowly turn it so the parasite comes out of the person's body without breaking.
Oh, we just took, at camp, we just took a hot knife and.
Well, because they don't burrow in you, right? These worms are
No, yeah,
actually
they burrow in
inside
your skin,
of their
and there's a
host.
hole in their
Oh, no,
and
no,
it's
no.
so gross.
Don't you like parasites?
No,
Wait, is
I
it
saw
like-
that episode.
Okay.
Like,
I have excellent news for you, my friend. As far as parasites go, I just want you to take heart.
If I ever get that.
The
fight,
grossest parasites typically live in not the United States. Well, I should say not the northeastern United States. So Michigan is the kind of place that you're going to live and only worry about certain parasites like, oh, I don't know, leeches. But hey,
Yeah, I'd
I'll
rather
take a
leech.
leech
Yeah.
before I take a worm that's burrowed into my foot or tapeworm. Yeah? I mean,
I just
put
amputated
salt on
the leg. I wouldn't want to deal with it.
What's that? Okay, so like, I know that there was like, it's like some
Wait,
type
you
of
got
like
one of
bug.
those?
That like, it was like a mosquito like bites you, and all of a sudden they lays their eggs, they see like some kind of egg there, and all of a sudden like over like weeks, you like gain like a huge hole in like literally like there's just like this random hole that comes out of it.
That was this.
Did it hurt?
Is that the same thing you're talking about?
similar too, yeah.
Oh.
So, it's all pretty, gross, all things considered. Commensalism. We said commensalism was a what kind of relationship? Neutral, so it's positive for one of them and it's neutral for the other. Mutualism
Neutral for both.
is a win-win for both.
Oh, yeah.
Mutualism's a win-win. And parasitism, well, win for the parasite, negative for the host.